Before you learn how to create custom messaging error handlers, you must understand the default behavior. Messaging errors occur when a mule event is being passed through a flow and an error gets thrown. When this happens, normal processing will stop, and the event will be passed to an error handler. In this illustration, you can see that an error scope has been added to the error handling section of the flow, and processors have been added to the scope. This is called a flow-level error handler. The mule event will pass through the processors in the error scope, and when they finish, the event will be returned to the calling flow, or the response will be sent back to the client. Though you can customize how your application will handle errors, all Mule applications have a default error handler. The Mule default error handler is used when there is no other error handler defined, or there are no valid error handlers for the type of error that occurs. The default behavior is to stop the execution of the flow when a message error occurs, and send error information to the console or log file, including an error message, the error type, and exactly where in the flow and XML the error occurred. This behavior cannot be configured, but you can implement custom error handlers. When an error is thrown, an error object gets added to the Mule event. It contains many error properties, but the most important ones are the error.description, which is a string, and the error.type, which is an object giving the lineage of the error, and it is described by a namespace and an identifier. Error types are hierarchical in nature, which allows for different levels of granularity for catching errors. This gives you the flexibility to configure an error scope for a specific namespace and identifier, or for any identifiers in the namespace. Each error object has a parent error type that is used to trace the hierarchy from the bottom up. In this example, the error that was thrown is validation invalid boolean. Its parent is validation validation, whose parent is mule validation, whose parent is mule any. The mule any error type doesn't have a parent and is the highest level messaging error. All errors are either general or critical, the latter being so severe that they cannot be handled. At the top of the general hierarchy is any. It allows matching all types under it. It's important to point out the unknown type, which is used when no clear reason for the failure is found. This error can only be handled through the any type. This allows specifying the unclear errors in the future without changing existing app's behavior. When it comes to connectors, each connector defines its error type hierarchy considering the core runtime one, though connectivity and retry exhausted types are always present, since they are common to all connectors. The most important thing about these error types is that they are part of each component's definition. So during the design process, you will be aware of any failures that could occur. In Module 1, you learned about how to configure the response that gets returned from the HTTP listener. Remember that there are actually two responses that can be configured, a response and an error response. By default, the error response returns the error description as plain text, along with the status of 500, server error. In the first walkthrough, you will use the debugger to explore different types of errors and experience the default error handling behavior. Then modify the error response that's returned to the client.